And yet, in less than 200 years, more than 3 million people will live on this exact strip of desert. You are standing on a flat, empty coast. Behind you, desert. In front of you, the warm, shallow water of the Persian Gulf. The ground is cracked, salt flat and sand. There is almost no fresh water. The summer heat is punishing, and for kilometers in every direction, there is nothing a person could really live on. There is no city here. There is no reason for one. And yet, in less than 200 years, more than 3 million people will live on this exact strip of desert. The tallest building on Earth will rise out of this sand. Ships and planes from all over the world will pour through here every single day. So why here, on a barren, waterless coast where nothing grows? Why would one of the most famous cities on the planet appear? Look down. The answer is the one feature that breaks the emptiness. Cutting inland from the sea, right where you stand, is a narrow finger of seawater. A natural tidal inlet, salty, muddy, winding about 10 kilometers into the land before it stops. The Arabs call this kind of inlet a khor. This one is the Khor Dubai, the Dubai Creek. It does not look like much. It is not a great river. No fresh water flows down it. But on this long, exposed, harborless coast, that muddy creek is the single most valuable thing for hundreds of kilometers, because it is calm. Here is what that means. The open Gulf Coast is shallow and dangerous, with no shelter from storms. But inside the creek, the water is deep enough for boats and protected on all sides by land. A ship can sit safe here while the wind howls outside. For a sailor, a fisherman, or a trader, that natural harbor is the difference between survival and shipwreck. So people came for the water that was calm, not the water you could drink. Around the year 1833, a group of roughly 800 people from the Bani Yas tribe, led by the Al Maktoum family, broke away from the settlement at Abu Dhabi and settled at the mouth of Dubai Creek. That family, the Maktoums, still rule Dubai today. They did not pick this spot for farmland because there was none. They picked it for the creek. And the creek gave them their first fortune. It came from the seafloor. The warm, shallow waters of the Persian Gulf held some of the richest pearl oyster beds in the world. Every summer, Dubai's men would sail out in wooden boats called dhows, and divers would go down again and again on a single breath, with a nose clip and a basket, to pull oysters off the bottom in the hope of finding pearls. For most of the 19th century and into the 20th, pearls were the entire economy. The creek was where the dhows were built, launched, and unloaded. The whole town lived around that muddy water. It was a hard life. The diving season ran through the hottest months. Men spent weeks at sea, diving dozens of times a day, with stones tied to their feet to sink faster, their ears and lungs aching, all for the chance of a single good pearl. The town itself stayed small, a cluster of mud brick and palm frond homes with tall wind towers to catch the breeze, hugging both banks of the creek. Was this the kind of place destined to become a global city? Nothing about it said so. It was a poor, tough little pearling port at the edge of a desert. But pearls alone do not make a metropolis. The next step is the one that really set Dubai apart, and it was a decision, not a gift of geography. In 1894, the ruler Sheikh Maktoum bin Hashir al Maktoum did something bold. He declared Dubai a free port. He granted foreign traders an exemption from taxes, told them their goods would not be taxed the way they were everywhere else. Think about what that signals to a merchant. Lower costs, fewer officials, more profit. The timing was perfect. Across the Gulf, the Persian port of Linga had long been a busy trading hub, but its rulers were raising customs duties and tightening control. Merchants there, many of them Persian and Indian, were looking for somewhere freer. Dubai, just across the water, threw open its doors. So, they came, and they brought their trade with them. Watch the town change. Dubai became an entrepot. That is a place that does not just sell its own goods but acts as a middleman, importing things from one part of the world and re-exporting them to another. Cloth, spices, gold. The creek filled with dhows from India, Persia, and East Africa. The banks of the water grew crowded with merchant houses and warehouses, and the wind tower homes of foreign traders. A barren coast had become a marketplace. Then, it nearly all collapsed. In the late 1920s and 1930s, two blows landed at once. The Great Depression crushed world trade, and in Japan a man had perfected the cultured pearl, a pearl grown on purpose in a farm, cheap and identical. Almost overnight, the world stopped paying fortunes for natural Gulf pearls. Dubai's oldest industry, the thing that had filled the creek for a century, was wiped out. The town grew poor and hungry. This is the moment a lesser place disappears from history. Dubai did the opposite because of one stubborn bet on the very thing that made it exist. The creek. By the 1950s, the creek had a serious problem. Decades of sand and silt had built up, and the water had grown too shallow for the larger ships that modern trade now used. The harbor that built Dubai was choking. So the ruler, Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum, made a gamble that defined everything that came after. With very little money, he borrowed heavily and paid to dredge the creek, to dig out the silt, and deepen the channel so big ships could come in again. It worked. Trade surged back through a creek that could now handle the modern world. Rashid had bet the future on the harbor, and the harbor paid him back. And then, in 1966, the second turning point arrived from under the sea. Dubai discovered an offshore oil field, and the first exports began in 1969. But here is the part that matters, and it is easy to miss. Dubai's oil was never huge. Its neighbor Abu Dhabi had vastly more. Rashid understood that the oil money would not last forever, so instead of simply spending it, he poured it into concrete and steel. He built a deep modern harbor called Port Rashid. Then, even more ambitiously, Jebel Ali port down the coast, the largest man-made harbor in the world, with a free trade zone beside it to lure global companies, an international airport, roads, bridges, power. He used a brief gush of oil to turn the old idea of the creek, a safe place to trade, into an industrial scale machine. That is the secret of Dubai. It was never really an oil city. Today, oil is only a tiny slice of its economy. It is a trade city, a harbor city, a middleman city, exactly as it was when it was just dhows on a muddy creek. Only now the dhows are container ships and jumbo jets. In 1971, Dubai joined 6 neighbors to form a new country, the United Arab Emirates, and kept right on building. It launched its own airline, Emirates, in 1985, and turned its location halfway between Europe and Asia into a reason for the world to change planes in Dubai. It built hotels, malls, and beaches, and sold the desert sun to tourists. The same instinct ran through all of it: sit in the middle of the world's routes, make it easy and cheap to pass through, and take a small cut of everything that moves. It is the Freeport idea of 1894, scaled up to the whole planet. And so the desert filled in. From a town of a few thousand pearl divers, Dubai swelled past 3 million people. Skyscrapers climbed out of the sand along the shoreline. In 2010, the Burj Khalifa opened, the tallest building on Earth, a spike of glass and steel rising from a coast that, within living memory, had almost nothing on it. To get enough water for all those people in a place with no rivers, the city now turns the sea itself into drinking water through enormous desalination plants. So think back to where you started. You were standing on an empty, baking coast, with cracked salt flats behind you and warm, shallow water in front, a place with no fresh water and no obvious reason for anyone to stay. The only thing that made it different from 1,000 other empty stretches of shore was a quiet, muddy creek that happened to be calm. That creek is still there. It still cuts 10 kilometers into the city, and old wooden towers still cross it, loaded with goods, just as they have for 200 years. You just have to look down to see it between the towers. Because everything above it, the skyline, the ports, the millions of people, all of it grew out of that one muddy finger of seawater that simply offered ships a safe place to rest.